Alright, so you can see why some critics would have a problem with the way that Mr. Spiegelman writes, but as he stated in our lecture, he writes this way because that's the way his father was. Okay, he is not apologetic. He's not going to take his father and turn him into a saint. He's like, no, this is what my dad was like. My dad was like this. My dad was a racist. My dad did this. And his dad had that incredibly black humor, right, of Hail Hitler. Okay, this gallows humor that you all think. Let's look at the next one, 35. Okay, I chose these next couple of pages because. Okay, here we go. Let's see, page 35. Yeah, 35. Okay, I chose this page in particular because of the background. Okay, I want you all to see that the first little square, one of the mice says, I tell you there's a program going on in Germany today. One fellow told us of his cousin that was living in Germany. He had to sell his business to the Germans and run out of the country without money, okay? Okay, and he mentioned specifically a program. And what a program is, it's an organized massacre, okay, of a particular ethnic group. For example, one of the, unfortunately, more infamous programs was the programs against the Jews in Russia, okay, or the Jews in Eastern Europe, all right? So this was something that was known. And I want you all to see that they knew, okay, that they knew, they had this inkling that something was going on in Germany, all right? But they didn't quite think it was going to come here. Okay, so you'll see that the next square has some cats, okay, with a swastika in the background. Okay, he had to sell his business to a German and run out from the country without even money. It was very hard for the Jews. They're terrible. Another fellow told us of the relative in Brandenburg. The police came to his house and no one heard from him again. Okay, you'll see those two have the cats right there, and then you have the mouse with the little sign that says I am a filthy Jew. Okay, this is very painful to see. This is very, very painful. It's very sad to see this, and when you realize that this happened, okay, but we're reading it in this new format, and I want you all to tell me what you think about this format, because this format, the way it was written, was criticized by a few Holocaust scholars, saying that this makes light of the Holocaust. I disagree with it. I think that it doesn't make light. It's very respectful toward the Holocaust, but I'm curious to know what you think. Okay, the last little square you see right there, you see my notes, of course, from graduate school, the placement of the swastika, but the little banner that says this town is Jew-free. It was many, many such stories. Synagogues burned, Jews beaten with no reason, whole towns pushing out all the Jews. Each story was worse than the other. And the last one, let's hope those Nazi gangsters get thrown out of power. Just pray that they don't start a war. So this is even before the war started. Wow. Okay, it was like little by little, all of these events were happening. The next one is just a graphic, and sometimes I'll just throw graphics in there, okay? So the next page, it states Chapter 3, The Prisoners of War. I wanted you all to see the cats. Okay, notice how the cats are big and they're brooding and they have like coats and they're pointing toward the little figure at the bottom that you can't really know. Is it a mouse? You don't really know what it is. You're assuming it's a mouse, okay? It's just part of Mr. Spiegelman's genius. Okay, this art is just ingenious and I love it. Alright, the next pages that are coming up are page 84 and 85. Okay, and I want you all to pay attention to this one because this story is very biographical. If you were to read the entire one, it's not linear. They keep going back and forth. So it's in the present, then it's back in before World War II started. Then it talks a little bit about World War I. Then you come back to the present. Then it's back during the Holocaust. Then they're in their camp, and then they're over here. Okay, so it's not linear at all, and that's how most stories go, right? You're sitting with a friend and you're like, hey, have you been? Hey, do you remember this one time that we went to that bar? No, not that time, the other time. Okay, yeah, and then we went to the restaurant. That's how stories go, okay? And that's how he's writing it. This is how people speak. Okay. Let's look at this part right here. You will see in the third little rectangle, because we have rectangles here. You see that poster at the back? Reward for every unregistered Jew you find a kilo of sugar. Okay, and right here, Vlad is telling his son that there was an order that all Jews must be relocated into another quarter. Okay, so that's what they tell them, and you find out in the story that Mr. Spiegelman's wife Anya, her family was loaded. They had a lot of money, so they were able to buy a few favors, as we find out later. That really doesn't work eventually. Okay, so you see in that the same rectangle that I was just showing you all. Okay, you see the dark figures, right? The dark figures, the mice, the dark figures that are being pushed away. And you find out that they're very happy that at least the family are together. They didn't have any more luxuries, but at least the family were there. And I want you all to look at page 85. Okay, this is Mr. Spiegelman's father, Vlad, speaking. For a couple of months, I did hear still my black market business. Then came more bad news. Okay, you find out that Nahum Cohn and his son were arrested, and it turns out that what the Nazis did was they hanged them, and they hanged them in the town square for a full week. Okay, and I want you to scroll down until you see the last two rectangles with the feet are there. Okay, there was a recent movie that was released. This is a scene. Okay, it's very traumatic. Don't want to talk about it. Don't want to spoil it for you all. But if you see the way that the shoes are just floating, okay, yes, they're mice, but they're wearing shoes. All right, and if you think about it, okay, these men were hanged in. Okay, they were in the courtyard. They were hanged in the courtyard, and when people were walking by, okay, their eyes would see the shoes. Okay, that's what the eyes were drawn to, seeing the shoes. It's a very powerful scene that you see there. Okay, the one thing I will say about this is, remember what Vlad was talking about friends, what friends do. Okay, these friends didn't rat them out. All right, they were not. Sounds like a horrible word right now. They were not ratted out. They were not tattled. Okay, these friends kept their secret until the end. So yeah, real friends, right? The next one I'm going to show you, there are 3 pages to it, 88, 89, and 90. Alright? This is what I would tell you with I would never. Okay, I would never kill my little sister. I would never take her shawl. I would never. Okay, we often think of this, I would never, right? But look at this scene right here. Okay, they had the order. If you look at the third panel, all Jews over 70 years old will be transferred to the Theresienstadt in Czechoslovakia on May the 10th, 1942. A community better prepared to take care of the elderly than ours. Right, so that's the order. You'll see that they get the notice of a little convalescent home. All right, but Anya's grandparents were 90 and they didn't want to leave. There was something fishy about this. They didn't want to leave. So what Vlad says at the bottom, we didn't yet know of Auschwitz, of the ovens, but we were afraid. So they had this little hiding place, right? They put the grandparents in the false wall. Okay, so they were hidden back there. They snuck food to them. They sneaked food to them, and everything was all right, right? Because they were safe. Of course. Why? Because you're going to protect the grandparents. We're not going to send the grandparents away. No, of course, that's wrong. We'd never do that. Except that when you get to the next page, you find out that in the second panel, Mr. Zeidelberg, you and your wife must come with us. If the Carminos don't turn up the older people, in 3 days you two will be sent to their place. So they had to give up their grandparents. That was that, right? He wrote that we had to give over the grandparents, even if they took him away now. Next, they would grab his wife and the rest of his family. So what happened? We had to deliver them. We thought they were going to be okay. And of course they weren't. They went right away to Auschwitz, to the gas. Okay, so remember, next time you're thinking, I would never do. Okay, we just haven't found ourselves in that situation. Joe, I think there's something wrong with it. There's something wrong. So yeah, if you're ever playing, I would never. Well, look at what happened here, and it was just, it happened. Okay, look at the next page 90. When did you first hear about about Auschwitz? We heard right away. Even from then, from that other world, people came back and told us, but we didn't believe. Then the same news came and more, so we believed, and later on we saw it was even worse. Okay, and I want you all to think about this, because a lot of people say, oh, well, they didn't know about Auschwitz, but they found out and they didn't believe it. It is unbelievable, okay? It's unless someone's lived through a situation like this, it would be unbelievable. How does this happen? How did we allow 11 million people to be taken and systematically killed? But it happened, okay? And when we hear about bad things or horrible things, we don't want to believe them, because we don't want to believe that people are capable of this, okay? We don't want to believe that the train car 781 with the Japanese army, we don't want to believe that that actually happened, because we don't want to believe that people are capable of committing such atrocities, okay? This is probably what the Spiegelmans were thinking. This can't happen. I mean, how could this possibly happen here? All right, this is inconceivable. It's unbelievable. This atrocity, it's hard to believe, but then we know it happened, okay? And we know that we find out here that there was another registration, right? Okay, we find out that they had to go to the stadium and they had to register, because if you were sick, you were taken away. But if you were okay, you were allowed to stay. Okay. Let's go to the next page, 92, and you see that they are there's a big stadium, right, with children with people all around. Okay, and they lined up and they had their papers, right? Old people, families. This is the second panel. Old people, families with lots of kids, and people without work cards are going to the left. We understood this must be very bad. Okay, me and Anya came to the table where my cousin was sitting. Ah, you work at the carpentry shop. Go to the right. Okay, so they got stamped. Went to the right. Okay, to the good side of the stadium. Those that were sent left didn't get any stamp. We were so happy we came through, but we worried now. Where were our families? Okay, so they find their families, and Mr. Spiegelman says, did you see my father, right? Vlad says, did you see my father? Later, someone told me that he came through this cousin and went to the good side. Okay, Spiegelman to the right, okay. Then came Fala, his daughter. They sent her to the left. 4 children was too many. Okay, and of course the father says, my daughter, how could she manage alone with the 4 children to take care of? Then what do you think? He sneaked to the bad side, and those on the bad side never came any more home. Okay, those with the stamp were able to go home, but there were very few Jews left. 1 from 3 they kept at the stadium, maybe 10,000 people, and with them my father. Okay, so you see how little by little the circle is tightening around them, and it's getting harder and it's getting worse, but there's nothing that could be done at this point, I don't think. Okay. If we look at page 94, this is when Art Spiegelman is speaking to Mala, to his stepmother. Okay, and they're speaking about the stadium. Okay, she's like, oh yeah, my mother was taken there, and she tells him the story, right, about how horrible it was and how many people were crowded into the prison, and people jumped out of the windows, and she's talking about her mom, right, but eventually her mom was also taken to Auschwitz, and her father was, and they were killed in Auschwitz. Okay, let's go to page 95, and I want you to look at the third panel. Okay, in the third panel, when Art's saying, oh look, he has all these calendars, and he has all of this, and all of, he's a hoarder, his dad is a hoarder, and Mala says he's more attached to things than to people. Okay, and his father is a hoarder. Okay, he is a hoarder, and if you've ever watched those programs about hoarding, you'll understand that it's psychological, because remember, Mr. Spiegelman, Vlad Spiegelman, the father, he's lost a lot. You find out that he loses his son, he loses his wife. Later, he loses his family in the Holocaust. But remember, things don't die and things don't leave you. That's why it's easy for people like him, or people who have been deeply traumatized, to just get more and more and more stuff, because stuff doesn't leave you. Stuff loves you. Okay, things will never leave you. All right, and this is psychological. A lot of psychologists will tell you this. Right? Right now, the last portion of our reading for this one right here is chapter 5, mouse holes. Okay? I want you all just to look at the graphic. Okay, you have like a little, kind of like a little dome. Okay, you have the mice just huddling around him. Okay, again, like I said, the circle is getting smaller and smaller as we continue on. Let's go to the second file of mouse. It's called mouse 2. Here we go. Okay, let's look at 109. Let's see. Yes, 109. All right, let's look at 109. We're going to do 109 through 111. 109. All right, so the top at the very first panel. You've all heard the stories about Auschwitz, horrible, unbelievable stories. They can't be true. One thing is certain, bad as it is in the ghetto, being deported is even worse. Please, it's bad luck even to speak of it, okay? Again, unbelievable. This is unbelievable. How could anybody believe that there are camps, that Auschwitz-Birkenau exists, where there are death camps, where people are just sent off to the gas chambers and then to crematoriums, or they're sent off to work themselves to death, or they're sent off for medical experiments. How could this be true? This isn't true, right? Except it is, right? Okay. They start right here making a plan, okay, because obviously horrible things are happening. But what are they going to do with the children? And again, it comes to this idea that children must be protected. Okay? Children they must be protected. And we looked at it in 109 that they send Rishu along with his cousins to someone's house and keep them there. Okay, and hide them away. Alright? Look at page 110. So Persis came and he arranged, and then he came back, right? So Wolfa, Tasha, Bibi, Lonia, and Rishu all went with this lady. We watched until they disappeared from our eyes. It was the last time ever we saw them, but that we couldn't have known. When things came worse in our ghetto, we always said, thank God the kids are with Persis safe. Thank God their Persis safe. Okay? And we find out here exactly what happens to children, right? Okay, some of the kids, next panel, were screaming and crying. They couldn't stop. So the Germans swung them from the legs against the wall. Okay, so we see this horrible image of violence toward children. So what Ozik said is probably true, right? That probably did happen. But this is horrible. This is horrible violence. And I want you all to pay special attention to that panel where the Nazi soldier is just smashing this poor kid against the brick wall. Okay? Alright, so they kept saying, oh, thank God. Thank God that the children are safe. Right? So what happened to Rishu? This is the next page. What happened to Rishu? A few months after we sent Rishu to Zawishi, the Germans decided that they would finish off that ghetto. Okay, so they're running off. The gunshots are going off. What's going on? You see right here, the Gestapo in the next panel. The Gestapo in the ghetto have been replaced by others from Opel. They have just shot Persis and the rest of the Jewish council. What? They're evacuating. We're supposed to go to the square with our baggage right away. They're sending all of us to Auschwitz. And of course, you see the woman there, little mouse. Oh my God, no. I will not go to their gas chambers, and my children will not go to the gas chambers. So she gets the children, and she kills the children with poison, and she kills herself to keep them from being taken to the gas chambers. Because that was going to happen to the children. They didn't keep children, usually. Okay, in the last panel there, when it's highlighted in purple because I had purple that day in class. I tell you, it was a tragedy among tragedies. He was such a happy, beautiful boy. Okay, that he was a tragedy among tragedies. Okay. I want to point out page 127, the symbolism. Again, with my purple highlighter, you see the swastika? That they have nowhere to go. Okay, so you see how it's the circle now is unbelievably small, that there is nowhere to hide, no one will take them in. And if you scroll down to the next page, mouse traps. The mouse trap. The image of these two little mice here. Okay, these two little mice under a trap. The next page is 138. Okay, and you see here that nobody will take them in. Okay, that they went to Rishu's governess, seized them. Oh my gosh, it's the Spiegelmans. You'll bring trouble quickly. Slam. Okay, can't get help from them. You remember, real friends? Okay, about the very bottom of the page, the first panel, okay, where you see them wearing masks, right? You see how they're wearing masks, they're wearing pig masks, so that somebody maybe would be able to help them. But look at Anya's tail. Okay, it's very long, right? Why? Because she looked more Jewish. He was afraid for her. Okay, because the Nazis had a list of the ways Jewish people look, okay? And one of them for children, I remember this, was that if a little boy was circumcised, chances were that little boy was Jewish, because Jewish boys were the ones that were circumcised, okay? So if you were trying to hide a little boy, if the boy was circumcised, chances are he was Jewish and they would be taken away. But in this case right here, and you see with my purple highlighter that I highlighted it, that you see Anya's long tail. Why? Because she looked more Jewish than Vlad did. Right? Let's look at the next page. I just chose this one because of the graphic. Okay, you'll see that the big truck crammed a lot of people into that truck. They're caught, right? They have been caught in the mouse trap. Okay, they're seeing each other, they're talking for the last time. Hey, here's some eggs, cake, just keep it with you. What do you tell the love of your life, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, when you think that's the last time you're going to see them because you're about to be taken into a camp? What do you tell them? Okay, here he gave her food. And we have the famous work will set you free banner here. And they are going into the camp. Okay, you see that the Nazis are there with their swastikas. They have the cat, the visage of the cat. You have the dogs there, okay, the guard dogs, and it's a very powerful scene that they're going in. Okay, so that's the end of part 2. Let's look at part 3. The first image you see in part 3 is Rishu. Okay, and that's Art Spiegelman's older brother, the one who died in the Holocaust. So he dedicated the second part to his son, and then to Nadia, and to Dashel, to his little boy and his little girl, who are not so little anymore. Okay, this portion takes place mostly in the present. You'll meet Art, and you'll meet his wife Francine. I think her name's Francine. You'll meet his wife, and he'll start talking about his experiences writing Mouse, and the experiences with his dad, because his dad continues on. Let's look at the purple highlighted parts. Are you depressed again? Page 174. Just thinking about my book, it's so presumptuous of me. I mean, I can't even make sense of my own relationship with my father. How am I supposed to make any sense of Auschwitz, of the Holocaust? When I was a kid, I used to think about which of my parents I'd let the Nazis take to the ovens if I could only save one of them. And I usually saved my mother. Do you think that's normal? Nobody's normal. Okay, nobody is normal. And this is the trauma that the second generation have. I didn't start having these thoughts of who would I choose until I took the Holocaust class. But to somebody like Art Spiegelman, this would be very normal for him to think. Why? Because he grew up with talking about the Holocaust. He knew his parents were survivors of the Holocaust. So when his wife says nobody is normal, this isn't normal. Of course it's not normal. It's the second generation trauma. And I've spoken to social workers and psychiatrists and psychologists who have told me that sometimes trauma is so difficult to deal with, it's so heavy that it actually imprints itself into the person's DNA, so that the next generation suffers part of that trauma. Even if the child has never gone through a concentration camp, they still feel it. Why? Because it's ingrained within the DNA. So that's something to think about. Okay, so this is second generation. This is the trauma that they're going through right now. Yeah, so this is the second part. Let's scroll down to, let's see, right here. Let's keep going. He talks about his little brother here. If you look at the next page, 175, I wonder if Rishu and I would get along if he was still alive. Your brother, my ghost brother, since he got killed before I was born. He was only 5 or 6. After the war, my parents tracked down the vaguest rumors, and they went to orphanages all over Europe. They couldn't believe he was dead. I didn't think much about him growing up. He was mainly a large blurry photograph hanging in my parents' bedroom. Okay. And then you find out, of course, he says, the photo never threw tantrums or got into any kind of trouble. It was the ideal kid, and I was a pain in the ass. I couldn't compete. They didn't talk about Rishu, but that photograph was kind of a reproach. He'd become a doctor or married a wealthy Jewish girl, the creep. Alright, so he can't, he's learning that he cannot fight against a dead person. Okay, dead people don't speak, dead people don't fight back. Alright, it's easy. Like I said, the thing. It's easy to love things because things will never leave you. That's 175. Let's go to 176. I never felt guilty about reshoot, but I did have nightmares about SS men coming into my class and dragging us Jewish kids away. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't obsessed with this stuff. It was sometimes that I fantasized Cyclone B was coming out of a shower instead of water. I know this is insane, but I somehow wish I'd been in Auschwitz with my parents so I could know what they lived through. I guess it's some kind of guilt about having an easier life than they did. I feel so inadequate trying to reconstruct a reality that is worse than my darkest dreams, and trying to do it in a comic strip. I guess I bit off more than I could chew. Maybe I ought to forget the whole thing. Okay. There's so much I'll never be able to understand or visualize. I mean, reality is too complex for comics. So much has been left out or distorted. Okay, so this is huge right here. This is so huge, and this is trauma. Okay, and Sigmund Freud has this theory about trauma and about the wound. That if you have anyone, and this doesn't have to be necessarily someone coming from a war, it could be a person. If a person comes out of an event with a physical wound, okay, that person will deal with the after effects better than a person with a mental wound. Because the physical wound, people tend to see that person and say, oh, they have a broken leg, or they're missing a leg, or they have something disfigured. Okay, well, that's a wound. They'll be a lot more patient with that person, whereas the person who has the mental trauma won't receive that sort of attention and that sort of patience. Okay, so I like what he's saying here, because he's like, I thought about these things and I'm not sure why, but like I said, it's that second generation trauma. Okay, that there is no wound there, and he has to somehow process these emotions. Okay, let's continue on to the next video because this one's about to end. Okay, so let's go to the next one.